Welcome back, guys. JE Live. And here's the crazy thing is that we're doing a show at like, what is it, 5 Eastern
Yeah.
time? I don't normally do early shows like this, but like I literally just went like Devin's like, hey, like when are we gonna do a show together? And I just keep like, it's been so hectic. I'm like, you know what? Devin, are you free at 5? Let's just do it right now. Like, let's just bang this thing out, just have a good time on a Friday. And let's just do it right now because I have not seen that face of yours. I mean, I have because I've watched your videos and stuff, but I have not seen your face to my face since the 2020 draft when we did that live stream day 3 when we're shouting off different UDFAs, man. It was unlike anything I've ever done. It was a lot of fun. So
Yeah, man, it was awesome. And first of all, thanks for having me on the show, man.
absolutely.
I think the good thing, the great thing about this is that we both have mutual respect for the work that we do, and that's kind of how we connected. Just making content and constantly being on top of things. And that night it was awesome. You had Nick Farbaugh, you had Mike, of course, Alexis, had so many different people coming in and out. And to me, the best day was day 3. That's my favorite day of the draft because you got all these guys that you're rooting for personally that you want to see succeed. And being able to be a part of that, knowing all these different names, I think that's when I was like, yeah, like I love doing these live shows and stuff like that. So really, since then, both have evolved a little bit. So it's good to be back and just talking ball and just talking in general, man.
Absolutely, man. And like you said, I mean, we all have tremendous respect for one another. I already had your co-host on here, your partner. And here's the thing, like I think the with everything, like this whole space, like we talk about, like for instance, on like, football Twitter or whatever, I think it's really cool how it's broken up into like you have your fantasy football, you have your draft nicks, you have your NFL, you have your team-based, content, but you do like literally everything. And I just respect the hell out of it because like now you're with I mean you were with before, but you're with Steelers Depot. And I could tell you my
Mm.
cousin Adam, who's in our engagement group, he has been like nonstop fanboying over Steelers Depot for like years. And
Yeah.
it's cool because like he's like, yo, Devin Jackson? He writes for Steelers Depot. This was like a year ago. And I was like, yeah, that's my guy. Like, it's funny, like the way, things have evolved. You're with Blue Chip. I love Blue Chip. I love everybody there. You're just a ton of great people. But not only that, like, there are a bunch of people that are like informed. It's like that's we were talking about that off air. It's a bunch of people that are legitimately, they have like that informative content, that care about putting out actual articles instead of articles, instead of fake news, whatever you want to call it. Like you guys really do a great job of analyzing. I've been seeing Glassmeyer, all of them just dropping those scouting reports. I'm sitting here like, man, you guys are scouting the 2022 class, and I'm sitting here like, bro, I don't even know like what to even make of that class right now. Like I have not truthfully watched any film on the 2022 class because it takes me a while to get into it, and you guys are just machines. You're like cranking out shit like left and right. Like I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I gotta give props to my team, man. A great group of guys that we're all different. We don't all approach things the same way, and I think that's so important to have on a team. You have such diverse content, such different ways of thinking. I mean, we have discussions every day about different prospects. We have different opinions on prospects. And I mean, I can give you an example. A player like Desmond Ritter, a player like Keaton Slovis, like players like that, like we have a wide variety of opinions on them. And I think it's interesting to be able to have those different opinions. And then we all want the same goal. We want to create content and have fun in the process doing so. And, being a part of that environment, not only that environment, but the engagement group, definitely continues to motivate you. And you see all these people making great content, and I think for me, the most important thing is like what I try to do, or my approach is that you try to make content that you think, maybe outside the box, maybe that people don't necessarily think about. And for me, that's my biggest thing. That's why I've kind of done a wide variety of things. I don't want to be in that one box. I can only do, NFL draft analysis, but I want to be able to do NFL analysis and be able to talk about different players and schemes and whatnot. And like kind of one of my goals this offseason was to learn more specific schemes. So spent time studying, defenses and philosophies and whatnot. Because I think like the more that you know and the more that you can gain knowledge of, the better your content will be. So I've tried to take, the next step in terms of not only just using film and breaking down that, but, even adding in some analytics, and being able to be more versatile. So definitely I get props to my team at Blue Chip. We do a great job, getting, players scouted, and I think we have probably close to 200, maybe even more reports already for the 2022 class. So definitely excited about that.
Yeah, like I said, you guys just do a great job, and I love that. Like, you're gaining more knowledge. I keep saying this, and people are going to get tired of it that have been listening to me. But I've been taking these courses on like YouTube, and I don't know if you know Think Media at all. They're really great if you want to learn anything about making videos or making podcasts or even just having more confidence in front of the camera. Now, I have a lot of confidence too much, honestly, but there's people that don't. And, I definitely would point them in that direction. But Sean Cannell, who is the main man there, he actually follows me on Twitter. When I got that follow, I was like, what? But yeah, Sean Cannell, he says every single time, he's like, just get 1% better each video. That should be your goal. Just get 1% better. And I would apply that with anything, get 1% better every article, get 1% better, every little film breakdown you do, learn the defenses. Like I've struggled with that because I have no football background. I did not play football. I played baseball and like for 13 plus years, but I always found myself like when the Rams were on TV versus when the Yankees were on TV. I love both teams, but there was just so much more of a love for the Rams than there was for the Yankees. And when people ask me, what team, if you could pick any team to win a championship, I'm like, Rams. Why are you asking me this question? Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. The Yankees have 27 of them. We can manage. But, my biggest thing, though, is football has just kind of taken over, whether people want to admit it or not. Like, we could talk about baseball being America's pastime. And to me, that leads to a different conversation, which we could absolutely have, because I think I've made it very well known in our group that I do not like the way the NFL has preserved the history of the sport, whereas the MLB, I don't love I don't like really any of the things they're doing in this modern era, but I love the way they preserve the history of the sport. And, we could talk about that, but right now the NFL is supreme. And the reason for that, and the reason why the NFL draft content is doing so well, is because they have people like you and I, people like anybody from my Downtown Ram staff, anybody from your Blue Chip staff, anyone from any of the staffs that are in our, content group, right? Our niche, but also outside of that, the fantasy football community. All of these people are adding more value. And I think the casual fan in the past that may not have thought about things like third string quarterbacks and things like that are now thinking about third string quarterbacks, and are not only that, they're going on message boards, they're going on comment sections, and they're like, well, you didn't talk about this guy. He's a UDFA. I like him. Was that ever that was not a thing, when you go back maybe 10 years ago. And the first person that really brought my attention to this was a friend of the podcast, Charles Davis. He said, the casual fan, the average fan has gotten smarter. And so we have to make sure that we are on our game. Otherwise, we're going to get called out by anybody. And I thought that was spot on, because I'm noticing it more and more and more that, there's just so much content out there and people will consume it.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're in an age where there's new articles, there are new videos, there's a new everything every single day. And, it's become to a point where you really got to pick and choose. You don't want to, I think back then it was kind of the model was like get as much stuff out as you can and still do that. And to some degree, some companies still do that. And it's good to have at least an article or two new up a day. We try to do that at Blue Chip Scouting. It's kind of our new initiative this summer to have constant articles. But at the same time, like, personally as a content creator, you have to, like I said, think outside of the box, because, you take one subject matter and you think about how many people have written about that same matter, but then you have to think about the different angles you can attack. And I think that's what's starting to branch more and more with the casual fan. Is like, we know everything about the team. You know the roster, you know the coach, you know the history, but do you know the 73rd person on the roster? When you get to the 90 man roster in preseason, do you know the 89th and 90th name? And can they make the team? So now it's become even more like involved. It's become a full year-round thing. We talk about football year-round now. It's not even like there's really no off-season if you think about it, because after the Super Bowl, you go into, you got the Senior Bowl, like in between that, all the different all-star games, the combine, pro days, and then the NFL draft. And then all of a sudden you're at OTAs. So it's like, a constant year-round thing now. So, it's become even more fun, I think, to create content now, because it's a challenge. You can't just come out with the same types of things you've been doing in the past. You want to continue to evolve and bring in more people, because, you get an audience, you get, kind of people that want to read your work and kind of keep up with you. But the thing is, you want to grow and continue to expand your reach, so that, the person on the other side of the world, they may read your article and say, wow, I would have never guessed that or knew that before reading this. So that's always been my goal, thinking about the things that I want to create, because you never know who's going to read it. You could have, and thinking about like within like Draft Tour specifically, you can have someone from the Draft Network, from PFF, from big sites like that. They might be reading your work and like, wow, this guy is becoming a rising star. So, that's why anything I put out, I triple, quadruple check, make sure everything looks good, and just try my best to promote it and allow people to kind of see what I see in certain players and in teams.
No, I mean, I think it's well received, and I think you've now established yourself, in this industry, in this space, whatever you want to call it, as somebody that's just a workhorse, get stuff done, but also that you're supportive of everyone else. So it's like, man, you sure got a lot in your corner here. Well, let's see. He's a hard worker. He supports everyone around him, and he's never shown any sign of negativity on the timeline. Okay. All right. I'll give this Devin Jackson a look. By the way, I don't know what your co-host is doing, but he's dogging at you for your shirt. I don't see any issue with your shirt.
It's a classic Monday Night Football shirt.
Yeah.
He might have thought it was a Jets shirt or something, but I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Funny story with the shirt is that my girlfriend, she actually got it online on eBay. It's kind of a like one of the early 2000s logo Monday Night Football shirt. So she got it for me, and I wear it, at least once a week. I love the shirt. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if there's never anything extravagant like on this. Like I'm never gonna wear anything crazy. Like the craziest thing I've ever worn is a jersey. That's it. Like, it's always a shirt, just a regular shirt. Maybe it has a design, but regardless, the way the mic is pointed, it doesn't even matter. Like, you're not even going to be able to notice. But let's get to some football. I think we've talked a lot about, what's going on with the space, what's going on with you. Well, I don't know if we got too much into it, but I don't want to get you in trouble. Like, you got into Twitter prison. Yep. And like it's not been the easiest year for you. We can say that.
Yeah. The month, it was funny because like it happened a week before the draft. Like right, like it was like the Super Bowl of NFL draft Twitter. It's like, you spend all these hours watching film and doing scouting reports and stuff. and now you got to see if your projections, kind of match up. So it's like, oh dear God, Mike. Good.
He
But
wants you to
yeah,
dress up as Jason Tatum.
absolutely not. I'm getting a haircut next week, so it's gonna be done. But yeah, so we spent all that time doing so, and honestly, I still don't even know the exact reason, because they said I could have been hacked, but they didn't confirm it. And I'm like, okay, just let me change my password. That didn't work. File complaints. It was just a whole process. But finally, after a month long break from my personal account, I finally returned, and it was long after the draft, so I didn't even get to really tweet my thoughts about the draft and whatnot. So it was a wild couple months for me, but like I said, I'm in a good space now, and just ready to look forward and continue to create great content, man.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I'm glad you're out of that, not the greatest situation, But so, what are your thoughts on everything going on? I mean, I think we need to shed some light on the whole. Well, first off, we don't even know what the hell is going to happen with Deshaun Watson, which I find
Yeah,
it just crazy. And furthermore, he's so lucky that Aaron Rodgers decided to make all of this noise. So it's totally distracted everyone from that. And honestly, I feel like the Texans are like, yeah, we'll just, all right, we'll push it over there. And Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills, you're our guy. It's like, it's been a really weird situation. Let's not get too much in the legal stuff, because I'm not a legal person. I don't look at any of that. When people are like,
yeah,
make a video on this, I'm like, no, that's not me. Go to somebody who has lawyer experience. I don't offer anything in that regard. My opinion doesn't matter. But
right.
anyway, in regards to that, Deshaun Watson, if he plays, are the Texans a contender, or is the roster pretty much just like the epitome of average to below average, to the point where they're not a contender even with Watson?
I mean, just looking within their division, man, it's gonna be tough to top what Tennessee did, this offseason, obviously adding Julio Jones. And you look at the roster makeup of the Texans, it's just not great. They have
Yeah.
a lot of aging veterans, plus a lot of rookies who are going to be stepping in and probably playing larger roles. So I mean, even with Deshaun Watson intact, I think it still would have been an uphill climb. And then, of course, you got Jacksonville. I don't know what they're going to be this year, but I know they're going to be an interesting team, a fun team to watch, and probably could win a game or two against the Texans, just based off the roster that Houston has accumulated this past year. And it really just boils down to some of the moves they made under Bill O'Brien. They're still kind of paying for that. All those draft picks that they don't have and didn't have, they really weren't able to secure any top talent. I mean, they got Davis Mills, but you only select him if you plan at some point on moving on to him, or potentially using him as your future. So that means, what do you do with Deshaun Watson, kind of his situation? We don't know. Obviously there's some legal things that still need to take place, but for the Texans, it's going to be an uphill climb, man. The division is one of the more tougher ones in the NFL. I think Tennessee improved. Then you got Indianapolis; they're a solid team. We'll see how Carson Wentz fares, but I think at least they have 7-8 wins in the tank. I mean, their roster is so built well that it doesn't really matter who's at quarterback. They can still win games and win them, in close fashion with how good their defense is. So for the Texans, I'm really uncertain about, first of all, their roster makeup. I think they just don't have enough. And then, secondly, the quarterback situation is one that's very precarious. I mean, if you don't have Deshaun Watson, you have Tyrod Taylor, who probably would start ahead of Davis Mills. But if Tyrod Taylor goes down with the injury or whatnot, then you're throwing a rookie who had pretty limited experience at Stanford and dealt with some season-ending injuries. He's still growing as a quarterback. So it's going to be a work in progress no matter how you look at the Texans. And I think they're probably in for a rough year. And hopefully they're able to secure a top pick for next year and can start the rebuild. I think at some point they're just going to have to do a full-on rebuild.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I think that's what I think Casario is the name. Yeah, I think that's what Casario would want to do, and I think I feel for him because now all these people are saying, well, wow, like you can't even keep Deshaun. Like he walked into a horrible situation and losing, you having to get rid of JJ Watt and the Deshaun Watson thing. I mean, it's like honestly, I looked at the Texans like earlier in this offseason and I said they're a perfect spot to go if you're a guy like Philip Lindsay, because you can put good film out there, you can get the reps, and you can go back in free agency and go to a contender, or they could trade you to a contender and try and get some value at the trade deadline. Like I felt like this was a good opportunity for guys like that. But then a lot of guys like that started coming there. So now I don't know how good of an opportunity is because it's going to be such a huge timeshare, it seems like. And I mean, they also got Ingram, I believe. So, it's pretty crazy how that that emerged. But one thing I'll throw out is well, not one thing. We're going to move over to your team, the Saints. And man, what is happening with them? Because I would imagine they have a pretty good roster. I would imagine Jameis Winston, if they roll with him, they can make the playoffs. I think very highly of Jameis, but there's still part of me, and this goes with the fantasy community as well. I want to draft Michael Thomas, but I'm worried that they're not going to stick with Jameis. Sean Payton's going to pull his, and they're going to go with Taysom Hill. What are your thoughts on that? Being a Saints fan, being more informed in the team than say anybody that's probably in here right now.
Yeah. So the thing is like, I feel like no matter kind of what happens, I think the Saints are in a good position. But obviously, I think their ceiling is with Jameis Winston. I think it'll eventually come to that point. I think right now it's a lot of smoke screens, man. Personally, I think Jameis Winston is going to be a starter week 1 and starter for the foreseeable future. I get that, Sean Payton has an infatuation with Taysom Hill. We know how much he loves him and thinks highly of him. But I mean, if you look at the film from last year and when he actually had to start, the one game that sticks out in my mind, and it really didn't matter because the Broncos had their situation and they just they got shafted by the league. The game should have been moved back, in my opinion. I don't even think they should have played the game. But they had Kendall Hinton playing, and we know how that went. But to me, just the lack of movement that the offense got. I mean, honestly, if any other quarterback played for Denver, that game may have looked different, honestly, because Taysom really looked out of sorts. And to me, I think that performance speaks more volumes than, say, maybe his against the Falcons or some of the other teams they played, because you have a really good defense and you couldn't do anything on them, and you had opportunities to really move the ball down the field, kind of take that next step as a passer and show like, hey, I can be a passer in this league. But to me, that takeaway from the game was that he's a fun player, but it's not one that you give the keys to an organization. So for me, I think Jameis ultimately becomes a starter. And I think, like I said, a lot of it is smoke screens and mirrors and whatnot. And we know how much Taysom Hill is beloved by the Saints team and Sean Payton. But ultimately, I think Jameis will start. But, looking at the roster, there's some areas I'm a little worried about, one being the CB2. Obviously Marshawn Lattimore is locked in and will be, the Saints DB for the foreseeable future. But now you got a bit of a battle at DB2. Like, do you go with Patrick Robinson? Do you go with rookie Paulson Adebo? Do you go with PJ Williams or somebody else? So, a lot of the talk recently with the Saints Twitter is that maybe they go after Xavier Howard or a big name corner to pair with Marshawn Lattimore. And in theory, they could do that. They have the pieces, I think, to trade that they could do that. But I don't think that's really their philosophy. They're more about developing their guys and just building from within and making them move when they need to, not necessarily want. So they did a good job getting under the cap. They obviously restructured Ryan Ramczyk, which was big. He's one of the more underrated tackles in the NFL. Probably one of the best right tackles, and he's currently the highest paid right tackle. We know Taylor Moton just got his deal yesterday, but I think the Saints roster and whatnot, I think they're going to be a solid team. I'm not really too worried about them, and I know a lot of people are writing them off because like they have a new starter, and people don't believe in Jameis, but to me, I think what's going to help them is that one, the offensive line is as good as any group in the NFL. Two, you have Alvin Kamara in the backfield. I mean, to me, not many teams have that dynamic running back where he can just take over the game. We saw he had 6 touchdowns against the Vikings on Christmas. So to me, the team is built well. Michael Thomas, I think that's going to be the interesting part because I honestly think we're going to see a different Michael Thomas. And when I say that is because, obviously people call him Slam Boy and, kind of make the jokes. And he talks a lot of trash on Twitter. But I think, this last year has really humbled him. I think he's kind of taken a step back and like, look, I'm ready to just put my head down and work. And, I think he's going to have more opportunities to showcase his full arsenal, not just slants, not just quick routes, but being able to get down the field and show what he can do down the field and kind of get back to where he was a couple of years ago. So I'm excited about what the Saints have to offer. I think, like I said, a lot of people are writing them off because they don't have Drew Brees and they're kind of doing a new everything. But, I mean, without him in the lineup, they've been done just fine, So you got someone as talented as Jameis Winston, the most talented quarterback I think they've had probably in a long, long time, just on pure, ability and being able to throw the ball down the field. I'm just looking forward to the first deep ball that the Saints complete this year for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's honestly similar. One of the guys in fantasy Twitter who's going to be on the show next week, Dave Kluge, he actually made an interesting point about why, like, for instance, a guy like Cortland Sutton, he's super, super high on if he plays with, say, Drew Lock, but not as high on if Teddy Bridgewater wins that battle. I feel like that's similar to Michael Thomas. And what you were saying is like basically, yeah, they call him Slant Boy. But he can do a little bit of everything, and he just hasn't been used in that way. So now you have Jameis Winston, a guy that is not afraid to throw the rock, obviously over 5,000 yards with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just letting Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and guys like that go up and get the football. That's what you like to see out of a quarterback. Jameis will do that, sometimes a little too much, but with, Taysom Hill, he'd be more conservative and probably a more ball hog type of guy, because I mean that's that's what he is. He's like a gadget quarterback, tight end, whatever you want to call him. So that would be a concern, just similar to Cortland Sutton, where Drew Lock is more of a guy to be like, YOLO and just throwing it up there. And, then you have Teddy Bridgewater, who wants to be more of a short and intermediate passer. He can throw a deep ball every now and then, but he's not going to significantly try to test defenses down the field the way a guy like Drew Lock would do. So I think those are definitely interesting. And you mentioned Alvin Kamara, who might be in for another monster season. And I think Jameis, the thing with Jameis is that he didn't have, and honestly, no one brings this up, but Jameis didn't have the run game that Tom Brady got this year. So I think that will help Jameis. On top of that, he's going to be able to dump it off to Alvin Kamara. They're going to get him into the flow of, look, if you don't have anything there, you don't have to take that shot. You don't have to. You have Kamara. This guy's one of the best pass-catching running backs ever. I mean, like, he's seriously on a ridiculous pace. I don't remember if it was Cody in our group that shared that or if it was Shane. It was one of them. But I saw that tweet, and he's on pace to pass Marshall Faulk for most receptions by a running back. Like, that's insane. So, I mean, he's on pace for that. Jameis just needs to realize if you don't have anybody open, if you have to make a play, but you really he doesn't have the legs to make a play with his legs, just dump it off to Alvin Kamara. And to me, that makes Alvin Kamara, because I think that's how he's going to be used a lot. So I think Alvin Kamara might actually have a significant workload, more so than any other workload in the past, because Drew Brees will make good decisions, but Drew Brees isn't like Charlie Checkdown either, you know? And so I feel like if they get Jameis into that flow where, like, I'm not calling him a guy that just goes for the check down, but if there's nothing there and they get him to do that, I think he's going to have a lot of success. And Kamara is going to be a top 3 fantasy running back. I think Barkley ends up being the number 1 running back this year. I think Saquon is just the best running back in football. Just everything he can do.
Yeah. When
but Kamara is right there.
He's crazy, man.
Crazy enough, I'd take Kamara over Christian McCaffrey, because I think Kamara, what is lost on people is that it was always funny, right? You know, you get a nice duo of running backs, like we look at D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, but the problem is you can't get into a rhythm that way. So everyone's like, oh, it's really nice. You know, they have Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. I was sitting here like, no, it's not. Like, Alvin Kamara could be your go-to guy. Like, well, you know, he's not like 225 pounds. It's like, stop making excuses. Alvin Kamara could absolutely be a bell cow. Like 100% should be on the field all 3 downs. Like he offers so much ability. And it's like, now I feel like, yes, they have Latavius Murray, but I still feel like Alvin Kamara can be that guy. And I think they'll probably more so kind of push him in that. I mean, you said he had like 6 touchdowns, right? It was 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
again,
just
in one game.
What is that? What is that? What kind of performance is that? Like, that's just like, that's disrespectful.
Well, it was so crazy that he was walking into the end zone. Like, I don't know how to really explain him, because like you watch him play and it's like he just does things that just doesn't make sense. Like, you know, we expect it from Saquon. You know, we expect it from guys like that, but like Kamara, he breaks 7 tackles and then just walks into the end zone. You're just like, is it that easy? You know? So
yeah,
he's definitely the most fun player to watch on the Saints. I think, you know, when Mark Ingram was suspended, I think it was in 2019, and Kamara had the workload, they saw what he could do. That's ultimately why they decided to move on from Mark Ingram. And plus, they didn't want to pay him the money he was looking for. But when he was finally able to be the lead back, that's when I think the Saints realized, like, okay, you know, we really don't. We need a suitable backup running back, but we don't need someone that's a 1A or 1B to him, because he's 1. That's it, just 1. So
yeah,
he's definitely fun to watch.
Yeah, he definitely is. And we'll wrap up the Saints. I just want to talk real quick about the receivers. So obviously, you know, Traquan Smith, the hope is that he will be the number 2. We'll, you know, move in and it will be an easy transition. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Marquez Callaway? Because I loved him in college.
Yeah. To me, it's like, first of all, I want to give props to University of Tennessee, because they have become the Saints' go-to to get undrafted or late round guys. You know, they had Shy Tuttle, Marquez Callaway. They had a few other guys too that have really made a big difference. Obviously, Alvin Kamara came from Tennessee as well, so they made a living off of those type of players. But yeah, I love Marquez Callaway. I think he was even hindered a little bit by how, you know, depleted that the Saints wide receiver room was, and then also Drew Brees' arm, because there were times he got wide open and just inaccurate passes, or, you know, passes that were behind or whatnot. So he has a high upside, and it's just interesting to me because now it's like multiple receivers from Tennessee are starting to get noticed. I mean, we had Jawan Jennings a couple years ago, Marquez Callaway. I think this draft class, Josh Palmer. They're finally starting to get their recognition they deserve. So, you know, Callaway, he's such a unique option because he has inside-outside versatility. You know, you can throw him in the slot. He can be a big slot. It
Yeah.
kind of reminds me a little bit like a more athletic version of Marcus Coulson, and not just because of the number, but how dynamic he can be from the slot. And I think the Saints need that big body receiver over the middle. That's been a staple of their offense, and obviously a key to their Super Bowl run, having Jeremy Shockey and Marcus Colston back then. And now with him, I think he can take on that role. Obviously, they wanted Traquan Smith to take more of that role, but I don't think he's going to be consistent enough to do so. But I think for the Saints' future, they have a really good one in a big slot for Callaway, because he can do that. So I'm very excited about what he can bring to the table, and he wasn't even expected to produce like he did last year.
I know.
That was a more of just like he stepped in because of a depleted receiver room, and he played way above expectations. So that's why I'm like excited about the Saints kind of roster, because they have guys like they draft so well and they find UDFA talent so well. Like I'm not worried about who's gonna fill in spots, because they have their talent evaluators are awesome. They're able to find guys in all rounds and even after the draft. That's not going to be a problem. It's just about putting it all together and having that cohesion. But Callaway can really step up as a number 2 or number 3 option, maybe even 3 or 4, because I mean Kamara is basically the second option at this point. It's Michael Thomas and then Kamara. But Callaway is really talented. I'm really excited about what he can bring to the table.
No, I agree with you. He's somebody that definitely stood out on film to me. And then I saw last year what he was doing, and I wanted to pick him up in some leagues, and people scooped him from me, so I wasn't very happy about that. But he could be in for a surprising season. He might be a waiver wire guy that I would be looking at if he's not already on a roster, because I think this is a big deal. Traquan Smith really needs to take that next step, and if he doesn't, then I think he's next man up. I mean, you also have, Deontay Harris there. Maybe he steps in. But aside from that, I'm not too worried about anybody else, really stepping into that role, which is why I was surprised they lose Emmanuel Sanders, and then they didn't really replace him in a sense. And the only newcomer that they added was Kawan Baker in the 7th round. So, I mean, to not see them address that shows a lot of confidence in what they already have, and mainly Traquan Smith, because if you don't feel like you have your number 2, you would go out and seemingly get a number 2. They must feel like they have that. But before we get into what I was going to talk about, because I have a lot of Rams fans on this channel, so I definitely have to, please them. But before we get into that, they also got my guy Peyton Turner. And I am very, very, very high on him. He was my edge 3. I'm super, super high on him. What are your thoughts on him? Is he a guy that's going to come in right away and win that starting job? How are they planning on using him? Because I look at, say, the Bills, and the Bills go out and they get another pass rusher, Rousseau. And Gregory Rousseau, I just feel like they got a guy, and they talked about it before the draft. They were going to go out and get a guy that would be a long-term piece, because they loved their depth right now. They felt really good about their starters, and they wanted to go out and just draft a guy that could help them long-term. Is Peyton more like that, or is Peyton Turner going to be a starter day one? Because I feel like he can start day one.
Yeah, he could start day one. I think ultimately it really comes down to how consistent he can be on a down-to-down basis. And if he kind of struggles with that, I think he'll be more of a rotational guy early on. You still got Marcus Davenport, who has really underwhelmed some of the expectations that you would expect from him. Trading up a couple first-round picks to get him. You expect him to kind of turn out, and he just hasn't. But I know there was a lot of, kind of like anger and disappointment about the Saints picking him. And, I get it. The optics aren't great considering you just took an edge rusher a couple years earlier. But to me, if the guy doesn't turn out, there is no sense in waiting around for him, right? You got to bring in someone, first of all, that's dynamic and has insight. It has kind of versatility, can line up as, a 3 technique, can be an edge rusher off the edge. And I think that's part of the reason they brought him in, because he has that versatility and he has a lot of untapped potential. He's just
Oh
scratching
yeah.
the surface of how good he can be. And that's the type of player Saints take. Like, they take the young guys, they take, especially in the first couple rounds, they take young guys, they could take guys that might not necessarily put it all together, but have extreme talent. And Peyton Turner really burst on the scene, especially down at the Senior Bowl, and really later in the process among draft Twitter. But he was one of my favorites as well. I was not upset by the pick at all. I think he was someone that I would have loved to have on the team, and then he got selected by them. I was extremely excited because he's someone that you can really use on that defensive front. And now with the news of David Onyemata being suspended for 6 games, I think that gives him more of an opportunity to see the field earlier, because you could even play around with some of your fronts now. You can have you might move Cam Jordan down inside.
Yeah.
He's kind of losing some of his effectiveness off the edge. You can play around with your schemes now. So I think that he brings that versatility that he can do a little bit of everything. You have Cam Jordan, who, he's still a very good player, although he is aging. Then you got an inconsistent Marcus Davenport. He sees the field, I think, quite a bit. And then you also got Carl Granderson as well in the mix. So they have a really solid defensive line. And then, like I said, you can mess around with some of the interior as well, and put some of your edge guys potentially, especially on passing downs. Like, imagine having, a pass rush group of like, Shy Tuttle. Then you have on the outside, Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport, and then Cam Jordan working on on the guard. Then you have, the ability to really get after the passer without even drawing up a blitz package. Can do stunt, can do a whole bunch of different things. So I'm very excited about Turner and what he can do. I think he's gonna. I wouldn't expect him to be like a 10, 12 sack guy immediately, because I think he still needs some development in some of his pass rush plans, because he has a great speed rush. He has a great first step. Want to see the hand usage get a little bit better. Want to see more consistent on running downs as well. I think that may keep him off the field early, defending the run and being able to maintain your gap. But I think ultimately, I think he's going to be a key contributor, especially after a couple of weeks of the season. He shows a couple flash plays, and then it might be over for Marcus Davenport, honestly, because if he can flash like that as a rookie, just imagine year 2, year 3 of Peyton Turner.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. And it's funny because I really liked Marcus Davenport as well. He was a guy that I was looking at, just like Peyton Turner, for the Rams. And apparently the Rams don't really care to draft edge defenders when I really want them to. So we won't even, next year I'm not even going to bother. I'm just going to be like, you're not drafting edge defender. I'm not going to fall in love with another Peyton Turner ever again and get heartbroken. Anyway, let's move on to the Rams. I'm going to talk about them because I know there's people in here that are Rams fans. They want to hear your thoughts. The Saints guy, because we so when Mike came on, everyone was calling him the Eagles guy. Mm-hmm. It's like, now I guess you're the Saints guy. No, I'm messing, but yeah. So tell me, what are your thoughts on the Rams? Because I think everyone's kind of all over the board. I think more so this year, people are willing to buy in the Rams as a legit contender in the NFC. But there's been years past where it's like, I don't know. But I feel like Stafford has had this. He's had a really good, I guess, reputation in football Twitter that this guy is so much better than his surroundings. And if he just gets to like a Niners or a Rams, or with Belichick, or like we're just naming them off, like if he gets to a better situation, he could really take that next step, and he's already like a top 10 quarterback. So what are your thoughts on the LA Rams in 2021?
Well, first of all, they got a huge improvement at the quarterback position. I think Matthew Stafford has been hotly debated. I know a lot of people feel differently about him. It's like, he couldn't win in Detroit, but I mean, you think about all the different coaches he went under and all the different things he had to deal with, and losing a Hall of Fame receiver so abruptly, and just the many things that the Lions did over the years that wasn't necessarily conducive to winning. I mean, I think he's going to be really great for the Rams. And to me, I think what's going to be important is that the Rams have a running game. I think people don't talk about that enough. They have a running game. They have a very creative and unique mind at head coach and calling plays. Now you can really open up the playbook and do the things that you may have wanted to do over the last couple of years. You finally get that quarterback that he doesn't have to be a top 5 quarterback. You may not even think he's a top 10 quarterback, but he's a hell of a good starter. He's a very valuable piece. So that's the first thing that sticks out in my mind. I really like what they did with the draft. I know that people are like, I think the one pick that everyone is like, whoa, oh God, I had a loud bang there from Thunder. My bad. But
no, I mean, what? You're bad. What are you supposed to do?
I don't know. But yeah, back to what I was saying. Everyone was talking about Tutu Atwell, and they didn't love the pick. To me, I think the Rams draft kind of philosophy has been interesting. I know Jordan Rodriguez for The Athletic does a great job covering the Rams and what they
Phenomenal.
do. I was so intrigued by the draft process. Like I'm like, they do so many things with analytics and different things like that. To me, I'm not even worried about who they're selecting guys and where they're selecting them at. I know that Tutu Atwell is kind of an anomaly, his size, whatnot. But to me, you got to have speed. That's a premium. And to me, it's so important. That's why the Saints have Deontay Harris. That's why they use him in so many different ways. You got to be able to stretch the defense. I think that's so important because then you're allowing guys to have one-on-one, coverage on the outside. You still have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, or two of the more, I think, solid receivers. It's a really solid receiving room in general. I love what the Rams have in the receiving room. You add Tutu Atwell, and then the pick that I was like, yeah, they did something with this one. It was Jacob Harris out of UCF. Someone that I kind of watched later in the process that really popped off because of his speed and his length and his athleticism. He's going to make an impact immediately, and I know that people are like still holding out hope for Bryson Hopkins and some of the other guys, but I'm telling you what, when you have someone of that speed, that height, and that ability, you're going to throw them on the field. You're going to find a way to get them on the field. And that's not even including they have Van Jefferson and some of those other guys, too, that are going to continue to emerge. And now you have a Hall of Fame potential quarterback. I think, Matthew Stafford may push forward by the time he ends his career. Then all of a sudden, your offense becomes that much more dynamic. And all of a sudden, you're looking at maybe a better version of the 2018 Rams, the offense that, went toe-to-toe with Kansas City on a Monday night, and now you have so many more possibilities. You got a potential bell cow at running back in Cam Akers, and he's going to only continue to get better. He can be a part of that passing game. So now I'm really excited about the Rams offense. The defense, I think it's gonna handle itself. I mean, you have Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. Those are two of the best guys, best players in NFL. Arguably, they're easily the best at their position, without a doubt. And then to me, the thing for me is like I take personal things out. Like obviously, I'm a Saints fan, and we know what happened in the past, but when I'm looking at football and just looking at everything, I take that bias out because to me, they hit on their draft picks, especially the later round guys, like bet on their day 3 picks. They do a really good job developing them, and one that sticks out in my mind is Jordan Fuller. A lot of people just thought he was going to be a special teams guy, maybe at the end of the roster. And all of a sudden he's starting early on in the season. He's making big plays. So for me, I like what the Rams are doing. I think they're getting to a point where they're trying to really build the depth and whatnot. I mean, and I look at some of the other picks they made. Robert Rochelle was one of my favorite FCS prospects. Chris Garrett is someone that I loved a lot. Like I actually got to sit down and do an interview with him. And I knew he was going to be a guy that gets drafted. I know that people are looking at the D2 and he's like, okay, you're playing D2 competition. He can be something in a few years as well. So the Rams are really doing a lot of good things long term. I think obviously the biggest question mark will be that offensive line and how consistent they can be. I think that's going to be key to how far they can go. But I'm not going to be one that doubts the Rams. I think they're definitely a playoff contender, and if things really work out, they could push for a potential NFC Championship game appearance in just year one of what they can do. So I'm excited about what the Rams are doing. I like what they're doing draft philosophy wise, and they're just continuing to build up their team. I mean, if you think about the receivers they have, the tight ends they have, I mean, if they even get an ounce of the potential they can be, I mean, they're one of the best groups in the NFC at least, and being able to have that creative play caller, then all of a sudden you have, you could have a trip side, one side, you have Cooper Kupp in the slot, Jacob Harris in between, Robert Woods, and then Van Jefferson backside one-on-one. Then all of a sudden it's like, how are you going to defend that? So it gets real. You can get a lot of different, perspectives, a lot of different formations, but when it comes down to it, the Rams they're building something really good. And I would definitely tap in and stay tuned for what the Rams are going to do, because they've upgraded at premium positions and they're building depth. So I get a lot of respect with what the Rams are doing, man. Like I said, personal things aside, obviously, I don't have any ill will towards the Rams. I think ultimately in football, you got to separate the fan in you and the analysis. So, I definitely respect what the Rams are doing.
Yeah, I feel like I've done that more and more over the years, and it's just something. It's hard, when you're a fan your whole life, you have to basically grow into being an analyst or being whatever you're going to be. And I've been doing that more and more. Although I do like to make more fan friendly videos, because the majority of my subscriber base are Rams fans. And I mean, you have to also think, like, why is that the case? And the case is, I started just covering the Rams, and that's how I came up. But then it's funny because I've had, Rams fans be like, well, I didn't know you knew this much about other teams. Why don't you do other teams? I'm like, well, the viewership isn't as good. So I would like, no, I'm messing. But, I totally hear you there, because, for a while, like, I couldn't stand the Patriots. I mean, they beat the Rams twice in the Super Bowl. But, I found myself really liking what Bill Belichick was able to do last year with just a depleted roster. You talk about 10 COVID opt-outs, quarterback getting COVID during the season, losing Tom Brady, and just the fact they were able to scrounge up 7 wins was just so impressive to me. Yes, they got absolutely decimated on primetime football against the Rams, and I did enjoy that to an extent. But I got to give credit where credit's due, and it's why Bill Belichick has become one of my favorite coaches in football. I just respect the hell out of what he's done. I think, the problem is when you have such an amazing quarterback in Tom Brady, I think people lose sight of how great Belichick is. I think it goes both ways too. I think, some people will be like, Brady made Belichick, or, Belichick made Brady. We can't just give credit where credit's due to both of them. But if you don't know football, then 7-9 just is like, man, they didn't make the playoffs. Shut up. But I look at it like they really weren't close to a playoff team. That team with Jeff Fisher, or, a sub 500 to 500 coach, is going 4-12. How do I know this? Because I saw this with the Rams in 2016. So, I mean, I think maybe they were a little. I would say Jared Goff and Case Keenum combined were like having Cam Newton last year, because Cam Newton kept turning the ball over. That was a big issue with Cam, is that, the fumble in the Bills game that stopped them from going 8-8. The interceptions. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Even the goal line stand against the Seattle Seahawks. And
that made me so mad. Being a Rams fan, that made me mad because I wanted Seattle to lose. But it made me so mad because Belichick is so much better than to allow that play call to happen.
Well, to me, it's like, it was a tough play call, man. And I get the optics. You think about it, and to me, I have a feeling Cam was like, look, I can get us this, you know. I think there are sometimes when players kind of override, what the call may be, and you could have went a whole bunch of different ways, but if it really comes down to it, I mean, it's Cam Newton. You expect him to get that yard, and
it's true.
It's tough. And to me, it's like, being a part of, being able to play college football and whatnot, there are times where you're just around people and they're just like, look, I can go get us this. And you just trust that they're going to do it, and as a quarterback, you're going to be blamed for the losses and praised for the wins. So you might as well take it on your shoulders to do it. But that was the best game Cam Newton probably played since.
I know that was the bummer about it. Like you said, It was his best game in a while, and I mean, it just goes to show you, Cam doesn't fumble. They're 8-8. They kicked the field goal. They beat Buffalo, and if Cam gets in on that, they're 9-7, and now all of a sudden, it's a completely different scenario here. And I don't know, would they have made the playoffs in 9-7 with 2 wins over the Bills and the Seahawks?
I don't even
strength of victory, man. If there's a
they had a chance for sure.
The 7th seed was 10-6, right? I'm gonna look that up because that's interesting.
Well, when you think about it, the Dolphins went 11-5 and they didn't make it, so I think they still would have been on the outside looking in. The Patriots, I think Dolphins went like 10-6 or 11-5, and they didn't get in. So
okay, so it's probably 10-6.
Yeah, so it would have been tough for them to get in anyway. And the Dolphins didn't make the playoffs, and they were as good as they were last year. So it's hard in NFL. Literally, plays 2 to 3 plays can change a season. And that's just how it goes. I also want to say thanks to Shot by Nolan. I see his comment there, so appreciate that, man.
Yeah, he's great. He always gives credit where credit's due. I do love that. He's always in the streams. There's a lot of the people that are here right now are always in my streams, so I do notice it. Yeah, so it looks like it was the Colts. Dude, I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot the Colts made the playoffs last year. they may have played against Buffalo, but
yeah, they almost beat the Bills. I think they were, I think it was a drive short. I think Phillip Rivers was driving on the Bills trying to win the game, and they just couldn't do it. But
you want to talk about why I'm very iffy on putting Josh Allen in that elite category? That game should not have been as close as it ended up being. And a lot of that came down to Josh Allen's inability to live to play another down. He's constantly running backwards, trying to make something happen, anything happen. And I know my viewers right now know what I'm about to say, but I've been saying it since I watched him at Wyoming. The best comparison is not a player for Josh Allen. It's John McClane in Live Free or Die Hard when he literally shoots himself through the chest to kill the guy that is holding him back. Like, that is Josh Allen. He will literally kill himself to try to make a play happen, and that's my biggest gripe about him. I don't know if he'll ever fix that because there it is. Like, that's what I mean, though. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Like, he dropped back like 40 yards against the Chiefs. He dropped back like 20 against the Colts. If Josh Allen does that one play, I'm not talking about the whole game, that one play, if Josh Allen doesn't go 20 yards backwards, he doesn't take him out of field goal range, they probably kick the field goal, and that's not even a chance at the end. Instead, Bills fans are literally having a heart attack thinking, wow, we have this one. All of a sudden, like, Phillip Rivers and the Ghost of Christmas Past is about to steal their, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
But that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been that close. Josh Allen, phenomenal talent. He's got incredible arm. I have some questions. His accuracy has gotten better, but I still have some questions, obviously. And we're talking about putting him up here, right? If he's like here, that's not bad. Like, that's there's
better than
you can't even see my hand. I meant here.
Yeah.
Like, if he's like here, that's not bad. Here is like the upper echelon. And like, to me, Josh Allen is not there yet. He could be there, but like, I can't put him there yet. And so this year is going to be very telling. And I think, one thing my cousin, who I mentioned earlier, the big, Steelers Depot fan, He's also doing a channel. You guys can go check him out. He's got over 10,000 subs. Adam Steele on YouTube. Shout out to him. But with Adam, he's been saying this. We do the AJ show every Sunday, and he's been saying this. And I never really thought about this until he brought it up. He said, great for Josh Allen, great for Baker Mayfield and having better seasons. But what are they going to do when fans are back in the stands? And I think that's an interesting question because it's not something you can quantify, right? There's no way to know until you see it, right? Like we can't simulate, the decibels, no, because like when you're talking about like mental aspect of football, there's no way to know until it's happening. And so that I think is a really interesting argument for Josh Allen because I can tell you New York did not allow really anything. I mean, we were pretty locked down. So that'll be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a huge drop off. I don't think like Josh Allen will go from like being, flirting with the top 5 list to like go all the way down to 30 or something like that. But I also wonder if it could affect him a little bit. And Baker, I also wonder if that's the case as well. But yeah, that was an interesting one. And then another thing, you look at last year, Justin Herbert just absolutely, launching into that. I mean, he's in my top 10 right now. He's number 10 in the league at quarterback for me, but he's in the top 10. But it almost seems like with everything Herbert did, it's important to realize that Joe Burrow is just as talented and will be back and will have better weapons because he just got Jamar Chase to go with a guy that's already so underrated and so very good in Tyler Boyd, and they got T. Higgins. So, like, what are your thoughts going into this year about those two guys? Because I think we're looking at a closer debate, moving forward than people are ready to discuss because of how good Herbert was and recency bias. But I love Herbert. And I love Burrow. I would say those two, don't be surprised that they're neck and neck over the course of their careers.
Yeah, when they both went to organizations that have really gone through a lot of change over the years. You think back to when LA Chargers were in San Diego, they had a model of consistency. They went from Drew Brees to Phillip Rivers, so there really wasn't any kind of drop off. Really, they were perennial playoff teams. And then you look at the Bengals, they had Andy Dalton for so long, and before everything just pretty much fell at the bottom for Cincinnati. Both quarterbacks, I think it's hard to compare them, because their play styles are a little bit different. Obviously, Herbert's the more athletic one, the bigger one, the bigger arm. But you look at Burrow, he's one of those quarterbacks that are like, he may not have the greatest arm, he may not be the most athletic, but he's one, tough as hell, and then two, he just has that feel to play in the NFL. Like he may not be ever the greatest at his position, but when he plays, he makes magic happen because that's just how he plays. He's going to be tough, he's resilient. And I really hope he comes back off the ACL tear and comes back really strong. But when you look at both of these guys, one being, you look at the Chargers, I mean, they have a bevy of talent, man. They got a lot of talent at receiver. They have Keenan Allen, who is a top 10 receiver and still underrated by a lot of people.
Yes.
They just got the new head coach, Brandon Staley, and I think that's going to be very beneficial because they're going to, one, fix that defense because that defense lost them a lot of games last year. And then two, you now have a chance to really grow your young quarterback. Now, I'm the believer that I don't think Justin Herbert lights the world on fire like he did last year. I think there's going to be a little bit of kind of growing pains. You're kind of under a new scheme. You're under, you have a lot of different, things around you now. And I think he's going to have to do a little bit less. I think they're going to try and rely more on that running game. Obviously, he can sling it all over the yard, but they need some semblance of a running game to really keep a defense honest. So I don't think he's going to be putting up as crazy stats as he did last year. But for Burrow, I think now that he's had that experience now in NFL and Now he's upgrading weapons. I think he has a much better efficient year. And we saw this in college with Burrow. First year under a new scheme, he didn't look the greatest, and then obviously you bring in Joe, not well, I can't believe I just lost Joe Brady. You bring him into LSU and they explode. I think we see a similar thing there where he really bounces back and has a great season. And looks like the number one pick that we all thought he was going to be. So for me, it's like, I know there's been a lot of debates and people are saying now, looking back, maybe they should have took Herbert one instead of Burrow. But I think Burrow shows this year why he was the number one pick, has better weapons now. And I think they're going to be a little bit better on offensive line. Still worried about that offensive line in general. I also worry about Herbert's offensive line too, because they're both like, they have a few guys, but it's not really a cohesive unit. And I just worry that they both are going to be under a lot of pressure. But I think Burrow definitely takes a step forward and looks a lot better. And looks like above average quarterback as opposed to what he was last year. And, he wasn't bad last year, but he was running for his life a lot, one. And two, he just didn't have that full training camp. And I think a lot of people don't even take that into account with some of the rookie quarterbacks last year. They didn't have that full time to really develop chemistry and develop kind of that timing down and whatnot. So you saw guys kind of going on the fly and being kind of just thrown into a situation. Like Burrow was expected to start right away and be great, but you don't have that timing down. You don't have a great offensive line. I mean, you're gonna look like you did last year. And then Herbert, his ability to extend plays helped them so much. His athletic ability really helped him so much as a rookie. So I think both guys have really good seasons. I think Burrow probably has a little bit of a better season because when he has a lot more to prove. And then two, I think he's just going to have more time to develop chemistry with his guys. So I expect both of them to have solid seasons. I don't think it's going to be a situation where either of them are going to have a ridiculous season where they're considered an MVP candidate. But I think both of them really take another step in their kind of development and be the guys that they were selected to be, early in the first round.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun following those two because what we've noticed over the last bunch of years. I mean, all these quarterbacks are getting traded. So like the first overall pick, the second overall pick, and quarterbacks like that. And albeit it's not first versus second, you're looking at two. I mean, guys that could have been first and second. So I think that's a cool storyline for the NFL. This year, I'm definitely curious about that. But I'm curious about a lot of things. I mean, looking at, the same draft, I mean, does a guy like Henry Ruggs III take the next step? I mean, he was, my number one receiver in that class. Does Jerry Jeudy take the next step? Who, I mean, to me, that next step would put him in like that top 10 conversation. Justin Jefferson, then we're talking about top 5, like putting him up there. So, I mean, it's all, very interesting watching those players grow. Before we wrap this up, is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we did not already?
I'm just diving into 2022 prospects at this point, man. Just kind of get into that process and just checking out some of the top guys, but also mixing it with some of the guys that may not be as known or kind of under the radar. It's kind of been my philosophy. So I'm just trying to keep up with them, man. Just trying to, kind of get through at least 100, 150 guys before the season starts. That way, by the time
man,
by the time
you animal.
By the time we get to the season, there aren't any surprises or guys that I didn't expect to kind of flash on the radar. So trying to get through those guys, man. I will say though, the 2022 quarterback classes might be really reminiscent of 2018. I will say that. I think that there's not going to be a clear number one guy at all. I think right now the leaders in the clubhouse are probably Sam Howell and Spencer Rattler, but guys like Desmond Ritter, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, guys like that, they can really make a name for themselves this year. So if y'all, if your team is looking for a quarterback, you're gonna want to bet on a guy with high end traits. So it's going to be an interesting class for sure. But I've loved seeing kind of the discourse on some of these quarterbacks already. I think that people are saying it's not really a good quarterback class because they're comparing it to last year's and the year before, which is understandable. I mean, you had Tua, Joe Burrow, Herbert in 2020, Fields, Lance, Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones last year going in the first round. So, I get that, it's not living up to those expectations, but I'm still very excited about this quarterback class. I think there are going to be a lot of guys that come into the league and could really light on fire. I mean, we're getting more and more to those quarterbacks that can work outside of structure. So don't be surprised if you see a Desmond Ritter, Malik Willis, names like that all of a sudden pop up and are selected early in the first round because they can be that dual threat and be very dynamic guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's always really interesting when you have those quarterbacks that are coming up and how everyone has their own guy, so early on. Like for me, it was Trey Lance, and I stuck behind him, and people were like, Trey Lance #1. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm super high on Trey Lance. Like he's maybe my favorite quarterback prospect I've ever watched. There's something about him. I like him more than Wentz, and I loved Wentz. So of course he goes to the 49ers. That's how normally that works.
With Lance though,
yeah.
Think about any other class he may have gotten #1 overall. I mean, it was just a historic class in terms of talent this past year. I mean, honestly, if I were the Jets, I probably would have went Lance.
I absolutely
I'm not gonna lie to
agree.
you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I like Wilson. I swore he was gonna go to the 49ers because it just seemed like a 49ers pick. And I honestly think if he made it to 3, the 49ers would have scooped him up. But the fact that, Lance went 3, man, I mean, any other class, he might be #1 because his physical tools and just what he can do, the ball placement. I mean, there are so many things I could rave about with Trey Lance. I mean, I just don't think it was talked about enough that people tried to say, well, it was FCS or whatnot, but the man, he was making throws that not even NFL players make.
I know the deep ball that it's like, down the left sideline. I forget which receiver it was to. But that was when I was like, wait, what was that? And then there are people actually sitting there in the comments because I had that in one of my YouTube videos because I only covered one prospect on my channel. And it was Trey Lance. And this is around the time I thought maybe the Rams could trade up and get him because I felt like with Goff and Wolford, it's just like, what are they going to, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't sure where they were going with that. And Lance throws that deep ball down the left sideline. Wasn't a touchdown. And I had people in the comments section. There's half of you were like raving about him. Like, oh my God, Jake, now you got me all hyped for Trey Lance. And then the other people were like, man, look at the footwork, so bad. And he leads him out of bounds. And he didn't get a touchdown on that throw. I'm like, bro, he just threw that like 65 yards without like putting exactly the right amount of air under it. He just led him out of bounds, yes, but like he threw a coughing corner punt, and the guy, it was like perfect. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, so that's how it's gonna be. So, we're really gonna go to that length to be like people that can't even decide what good footwork even is, because I've seen that is like. I'm sure you've seen that like comments on your articles and stuff. Well, I don't really like his footwork. And you're like, oh, please tell me, what about his footwork that you don't like? What is the correct footwork, Mr. Man?
Well, there was a throw he made in the Southern Illinois game where he like went from 1 to 2 and he opened up his hips so easily. Like
Yeah.
the ball was like maybe like he could put maybe a touch more on it. And that's just being nitpicky, but like he just and you don't really see quarterbacks do that too often. It's like you see them, they have to reset fully. You know, for him, it was like here and then he opened up and just threw the ball. So it was like he was already more advanced than people even thought. And you know, watching the QB school and looking back, like I was watching it the other day, it was like this man here is like he can do it all already. Like you, first of all, you don't see many top prospects like in their first year starting being able to look off safeties and
Oh
then
yeah.
going from 1 to 2 to 3, like getting to the third or fourth progression. But he was doing it by game 7 or 8. It was like this man he can really be a generational prospect, you know, and there are very few guys like that. And I think the NFL has finally realized like you can work with the quarterback, man. If they can sling it anywhere and they show some semblance of footwork. His footwork isn't always perfect. No quarterbacks is, but when he can make throws that no one else can make, like in his own division, and there's maybe 2 other quarterbacks in the country that can make those throws, I mean, you can't really pass up on him. So even me personally, I wanted the Saints to trade up for Justin Fields or Trey Lance. Like I wanted one of those 2 guys. Like I didn't really care too much about trading up for Zach Wilson because I think he'll be fine in the NFL. I don't think he'll be as good as people are expecting him to be, but I think he'll still be a good quarterback. But I wanted the Saints to trade up to get Trey Lance myself. I don't care if they would give up 3-4 first round picks. Just do whatever you take to get that man. Because
I think he's worth it, man. And I mean, I got to give credit to the 49ers. They got him, who was my guy. And then they got my running back, Trey Sermon. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? But no, like, I have to give them credit because they do this all the time. I'm like, oh, George Kittle, he's maybe the best tight end in this draft. And he goes 5th round to who? Of course, the 49ers. So, no, I think, Trey Lance, and it's funny when I hear people like, oh, well, Jimmy Garoppolo should 100% start and they should bench Lance. And I'm like, hear me out when I say this. Not every rookie quarterback needs to be benched. Not every single one. Like, I know it works for some, but believe it or not, Trey Lance is way more advanced than the mainstream media made him sound. And that's what pissed me off. So there was all these people talking about him, right? And they were like, yeah, he's going to take like 3 years. 3 years. 3 years. Did you watch even 3 games of his? I'm sitting there like, he calls his own plays, right? He adjusts his own protection, right? He's not a clapper. He doesn't sit there and go like this and like look over at the sidelines and be like, okay, all right, that's what I'll run. Like he calls his own plays. Like he's more NFL ready than Zach Wilson. I don't know why people don't get that. Like he absolutely is.
Yeah.
And Zach Wilson, I like. He's my 4th quarterback, but I had a really high grade on him. The problem is he's got bust written all over. Like if you had to pick a bust out of those 4, obviously you don't want any of those guys to bust. But if you had to pick one guy that you had to put money on, gun to your head, who are you picking that's going to bust? Because to me, it's going to be Zach Wilson every time. I just feel like he has that, like, he plays very similarly to Manziel, first off. I think very similarly, which worries me. He's going to New York, so he's this broad personality that's going to New York. We saw Geno Smith completely crumble in New York. I don't know why he's in New York again. That does not make any sense to me. But either way, I don't understand like why, why you would think him going to New York. I mean, he's got some weapons, but when you look at like Justin Fields, like, man, that guy, he beat Trevor Lawrence. First off, he beat him, and then he got hurt. He got that like nasty back injury. Like you saw, and you're like, oh, he's in trouble. And he played. He suited up. He went out and he played the national title game. And they did not win. But you think Ohio State is getting there if Do you think Zach Wilson is taking him as far as Justin Fields did? Like, I really don't. Like, I think Justin Fields was the guy that everyone, not everybody, but a lot of people kind of threw. And all of a sudden, like, his epilepsy thing comes out. And it was just constant things to try to push him down the board and all that. But probably because somebody out there wanted him and didn't want to have to trade up. And I thought it was the Patriots initially, but then they
Oh
didn't bother to
man,
trade up.
I thought it was the
So,
Patriots too.
but yeah,
I was
I don't.
like,
Yeah,
there's no way that the Patriots won't take him if he falls to them. You know, there's just no way it won't happen because first of all, you got Cam Newton already intact, so you're
oh yeah,
running the same offense with Justin Fields, and then two is
exactly.
like you don't want to get stuck with. I'm sorry, I mean, look, Mac Jones is fine, but you just didn't want to get stuck with him, and ultimately they had to do what they had to do and take a quarterback, but. I tell you what, they would much rather have Justin Fields, but yeah, man. I mean, with Zach Wilson, man, it's like I want him to succeed, and you know he has really good talent, but I just can't take his talent over those other three guys. I just can't
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they've done it at a high level. One and two, they're not a 1 year wonder. I mean, technically Trey Lance is, but he was at such a different level. Like it was just ridiculous. Like he didn't even need
Not
the one
throwing an
game showcase.
interception, like
Yeah, like he didn't even need the 1 game showcase. He didn't need any of that. But you know, Zach Wilson's like he really did, you know, kind of rise up and he's just the product of how the NFL kind of operates sometimes. Like it could be a
yeah,
situation where Josh Rosen, you know, it could be a Josh Rosen situation where he just isn't right or you know made for that system and then it just kind of fizzles out. Now hopefully that doesn't happen, but the best quarterbacks always don't get taken first or don't get
oh yeah,
taken before, you know. So that's why I'm like you got to bet on traits, you know, you got to bet on what you see from these guys and the traits that Trey Lance and Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence have. I mean, those are translatable traits, you know, they're going to work. Whereas Zach Wilson is like, he does things, he makes NFL throws, but is it consistent? You know, is it going to be, you know, something that translates? You know, the offense really wasn't, it's not really what you run in the NFL, you know, and those other
yeah.
three guys, it is, you know, and they're calling their protections and they're doing all these things. Not saying that Zach Wilson wasn't doing it, but the command of the game, I feel like with Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence was a lot different than with Zach Wilson.
I'm also not 100% convinced that Zach Wilson was an upgrade over Sam Darnold. I'm just not. Like, because we'll see Sam Darnold with the Panthers. And I just think, you know, you're judging Sam Darnold based on what he did with Adam freaking Gase. Like, I mean, honestly, it's like judging Mitch Trubisky and what he does with Matt Nagy. Oh, wait, never mind. They did. I was a little higher on Mitch Trubisky than other people, and I always felt like, you know, he didn't entirely get the most fair shake. I felt like Nagy should have been gone, and I'll say this: I think Nagy was the first to reap the rewards of being part of like that Andy Reid Chiefs connection,
Yep.
whereas I would say Bieniemy is so much better, like so much better of an offensive mind, and he's sitting there and he doesn't have a head coaching job.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we both know that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's starting to get to a point now. It's like how patient are teams going to be with quarterbacks? And that's why I start to worry about some of these draft classes and getting quarterbacks and they're playing and they're starting. And it's like they may not look the best the first couple years. I mean, you look at Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield just last year. You can't tell me they fans and maybe even front office and in general were getting impatient with them.
Yeah.
And you give them 2, 3, 4 years to really settle into one, a good offensive system, and two, surrounding them with pieces to win. Sam Darnold really never got that in New York, and now we're gonna see how he operates in kind of a different offense and having weapons and having a decent offensive line. So, like I said, you can't really judge a quarterback and how good they will be till year 2, year 3, maybe year 4, in some cases. And that's what the Broncos are looking at right now with Drew Lock. Like, how patient are they going to be? You got Teddy Bridgewater battling out with them. So now we're getting to a point where we're constantly seeing turnover. We're constantly seeing these guys go early, and some may deserve to go early. Some you're like, I don't know how it's going to work out. So we'll see what happens. But man, we got an interesting year in store for the NFL. We got a lot of different starters. Got a lot of first time starters for some teams. And the last thought I'll have is, start Trey Lance immediately, man. You might as well throw him out there before things get bad with Garoppolo, and then all of a sudden you have to force him in. If he's the better quarterback from training camp, if he gets the playbook down, throw him in.
I agree, Jake. I really do think Lance's mechanics are excellent as well. No, I agree completely. So we're entirely in agreement with that, because it's weird because I loved Garoppolo coming out, but I don't feel like he's at any point has he looked like I thought he would look. I feel like he's just kind of like a cookie cutter. He'll show, every now and then he'll have a good game. But I mean, Kirk Cousins gets a lot of crap and he can put up points, a lot of points, and there are guys like, Derek Carr, where people laugh and they're like, they legitimately think he can't be a quarterback in this league. And yet I'm sitting there thinking, man, the whole time before they traded up, I'm like, if they go and get Derek Carr, they're going to the playoffs. Like, he's exactly what you would want in that modified West Coast style Shanahan offense, and having those guys that can run after the catch. And I just think it would have been a great fit. But them going out and getting Trey Lance, you can literally make every single throw on the field. And now offers that dual threat that you don't have with Garoppolo, that you do see with Kyler Murray in Arizona, that you do see with Seattle and Russell Wilson, that you don't see with the Rams and Matthew Stafford. As much as I love him, he's not like a dual threat. You don't have to worry about him, scampering 40 yards. That opens up, that's a huge reason, I think, why the Niners wanted to get one of these guys, because that is where you're going. You go out and you get Sermon, you have Mostert if he stays healthy. They got Mitchell. But on top of that, their weapons with Debo and, Brandon Ayuk and a big slot receiver that I can't wait to see. Again, in my unbiased opinion, I think he's going to be really good in Jalen Hurd if he can stay healthy. On top of that, you have George Kittle, a pretty underrated offensive line. I mean, I would say Brunskill even was somewhat underrated. Actually played pretty well against Donald. So, all across the board, and you have Shanahan as your offensive mind. If you're a 49er fan, you have to feel good about where you're at if you go with Trey Lance. And his growing pains will be existent. When we were talking about that with Justin Herbert. But the thing is, his running ability, and like you said, Justin Herbert's athleticism allowed him to do things that maybe other quarterbacks weren't allowed to do the rookie year. It gets you out of harm's way. It can get you into harm's way. It can throw you in like RG3. But when you watch Lance running, I mean, sometimes he wants to play, bulldozer. But most of the time, Lance is very methodical in his approach on how he carries the football and what he does. Like, he's not constantly running like RG3 did, and he doesn't take unnecessary hits. He'll bounce off guys, but he really doesn't take any unnecessary hits. And so that's why I feel like he will last in this league, because I know there's a campaign out there saying that there's not one single running quarterback that can survive. And yet we're sitting here. Russell Wilson still hasn't missed a game in the NFL. He's been hurt a ton, but he still hasn't missed a game in the NFL. And man, he runs all over the place. Like he's, what's his name? Fran Tarkenton. So, I mean, I don't know. I hate to say it to you Rams fans out there, but Trey Lance is going to be around for a long time. He's going to be a damn good quarterback. I mean, he's special, man. I'm not even going to hold it back. Like, he's special. Interested to see, a guy like Trevor Lawrence with, Jacksonville. And, I just saw the picture with him out with his receivers, Chark and Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones. gotta say, underrated move to get Marvin Jones. I think he's going to help big time. Not only his, deep ball ability, a guy that can play above the rim, but I think he's going to be a very underrated veteran presence that helps a younger guy like Chenault. And people forget, I mean, Chark's still really young too. So I did like that pickup. Now, I won't really get into what I think about their tight ends, whereas I think Tim Tebow could realistically be their tight end one when you really look at their roster. But they're running things a little weird, but I'm definitely curious to see what happens, with Trevor Lawrence moving forward.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence is going to be obviously under a microscope, and
yeah,
we're going to be watching every move he makes, even though, Jacksonville hasn't necessarily been the biggest draw for the NFL to show them in prime time. You best believe they're going to be in prime time quite a bit this year. So it'll be interesting. They have a very underrated receiving room. Like you said, Marvin Jones is probably if not the most underrated receiver in the NFL. And he kind of just went, kind of flew under the radar because he played for the Lions. So, it just goes to show you that some players don't even get the recognition because of the markets they play in, the teams they play for, and whatnot. But I'm very excited to see what Lawrence does. And I wouldn't be surprised if he went out one Rookie of the Year, even though they win maybe 4 or 5 games. I mean, he's going to be exciting.
Yeah, that'll be something to watch out for. But hey, Devin, I think we'll wrap this up, man. We've been talking for over an hour and a half, which is what I expected. It's been a while. We had to catch up, and then we got talking ball, and it was like, oh boy, we could go on all night. I mean, we have done that before.
Yeah.
I mean, remember when everyone logs off 2020 NFL draft stream. Everyone logs off. It's you and I talking about these UDFAs that are absolutely not making the roster. Like, we're talking about guys that are like literally top 600 prospect guys. And we're like, yeah, he just signed with the Saints, and this guy just signed with the Rams, and he got and we're at one point we were talking about like mini camp invites. I was like, all right, we gotta get off but hey man, it's been a lot of fun, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Jake Ellenbogen live show. And I was proudly joined by my guy, Devin Jackson. You can go over and you can follow him at RealD_Jackson. And please do. My guy does not have enough followers. He does such good work. And it does not make any sense. There's some paradox or some weird crap going on because Devin should have 10,000 followers. He's an amazing guy, but he's also an amazing scout. And he's just getting better and better every day. So definitely go follow him, join his journey. He's super supportive of everyone. Can't stress that enough. He's one of the good guys. You want to root for him as he continues his ascension towards the top.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to seeing, kind of what you produce during the season and talking more for sure, man. Like I said, I'm glad to be on, talk ball. I can do this all day. I can,
I know
could go on and on, but I appreciate you, man. And appreciate the work you do.
Absolutely, man. All right. So we're going to log off. You guys take care. And I'll see you guys soon.